Yeah. You know, what you just saw is some of the footage of some of the stuff that we've been up to since we've been in and around the space here at Central Baptist Church. We're so grateful for our friends at Central Baptist who've made space for us, who continue to make room for us, who've been incredibly generous with us and allowing us to meet in this space. And I'm just going to tell you, we have had so many people who have been praying for today, who have been working hard to make today happen, and who volunteers who have been here since the wee hours of the morning. And can we just say a big thank you to our volunteers today for all that they're doing? They've worked so hard. It's so much fun. You guys have no idea. One of my favorite things I get to do at this church is to lead this team of people who are good friends of mine, and I very much enjoy them, and I'm so grateful for them. But as we kind of move ahead into the service, are you all ready for a message on this Welcome Home Sunday? Is anybody ready for that? I have to tell you, it means so much to me that each one of you are here today and that you're worshiping alongside of us. And it's been a lot of fun to get ready for today and see the journey that God has had this church on. For the message today, I'm going to preach a little bit differently than I normally do. So if you're used to hearing my preaching, or if you've been around the block here at Second Story, this might be a little bit different for you today. What I want to do today, and it's funny because I just don't think we've ever done it in quite this way, is that I thought I'd take a little bit of time on this Welcome Home Sunday to just explain to you why Second Story Church exists. Like how it came about, what's behind it, what are the ideas, what's the kind of approach that we have to doing church and doing life together here at Second Story, and just to explain that stuff a little bit. But the thing of it is, I can't do that without sharing a little bit of my story and my testimony as well. So if it's okay with you this morning, what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit of my second story, and to give that a little bit of ground, kind of like basis in the ground and some foundation and some framework a little bit. I'm going to be reading 4 passages out of the book of Job as we share with you one piece of this at a time. Now, before I dive into it, I want to make it clear that I am not equating myself with Job, okay? He is Job, I am not. I want to make that clear, but the thing of it is, what I have found in studying this book of the Bible is that the book of Job is a great story that offers a framework for helping us understand what second stories are all about and how God works within them. Are you with me so far? Okay. So as we walk through this for the next 2 hours and 37 minutes, okay, I promise you it won't be that long. The chicken, the people who are preparing the chicken will kill me. I can't do it that long. But I'm just going to read 4 passages from Job, and I'm going to share with you my story and a lesson that I've learned along the way from each of those passages. And then from there, I'm just going to try to explain to you the kind of church that Second Story Church is and kind of what we're all about. Does that sound like it's ambitious enough for this morning? I think it is. So let's dive right into this. Let's dive right in. All right, let's do a little background first. The book of Job, the character of Job, the person of Job. For those of you who may not know, Job is a book of the Bible that describes a guy who is a very, very righteous man. In fact, the Bible describes Job as being, it says he's blameless in God's sight. He is upright in God's sight. Job is a guy who had a family. He is healthy, he is wealthy, he is doing real well, and he was admired to the point that even God found himself bragging on Job one day to the devil of all people. That is the way this story begins, is God is talking to Satan and actually is telling him that, listen, I know that you're the prince of darkness and everything. All right, and I know that you've gotten to a few of my kids. I know that you've rattled a few of their cages. But I'm just going to tell you, this guy Job, my child Job, my boy Job, you ain't going to break him. You are not going to break him. That's what God is saying to the devil about Job. Now, I'm just going to tell you, if you're having that kind of a day where God is bragging in that kind of a way to the devil about you, you're having a good day. Okay, that's a good day in my book, all right? But listen to what Satan says back to God regarding Job. So he hears all the bragging, hears all the chest thumping and all that stuff. And this is what it says in Job chapter 1. This is verses 9 through 11, just two verses, 2 or 3 verses. It says, Satan replied to the Lord, yeah, but Job has good reason to fear God. You've always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You've made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. In other words, Satan told God, yeah, it's no wonder that Job is doing so well. All right? You're the man behind the curtain in everything going on in his life. I mean, you are the driving force behind everything. You protect him, you bless him, you're walking with him in everything that he does. I'm just going to tell you right now, though, you take away that protection for 10 minutes, and you're going to take away his faith. That's what the devil is saying. He's saying, this guy won't last 10 minutes with me. I will break him down. So here's lesson number 1 that I've learned and that drives what we do at this church. Lesson number 1 is this. Is the first thing we can say about second stories from Job's story. And I want you to see if you can notice your own story as we walk through this as well. That nobody is above the attack. Nobody is above the attack. Second Story Church is not the first church that I have planted, okay? I've actually planted or I've helped to start 3 different churches throughout the course of my 23 years in ministry. And it's kind of funny because I never meant to plan each one of them. That's a different sermon for a different time. But each one of them was kind of, if I ever write an autobiography, it's going to be called The Accidental Church Planter. Because I didn't mean to, but we just started talking and the next thing I knew we had church. And so no, it's not the first one. The very first church that I ever planted was in a small town in rural Minnesota. And I was there for 8 years, almost a decade of my life that I was lucky enough to lead that church. And we've actually got people here this morning who were with me on that journey as we planted that church. And guys, I'm just telling you, what we experienced in that church was downright miraculous. It was unbelievable, the journey we were on. The people that came to faith, the growth of the church. At our height in rural Minnesota, we had over 10% of our town attending our church. That's unbelievable in rural Minnesota. We were doing things in rural ministry that other people, not a lot of people were doing this stuff. To the point that, and listen, understand, I'm not saying this to say something about myself. I just want you to understand the context of where it's coming from, okay? I was getting groups of pastors from around the state and even around the country who were Skyping me into conferences and meetings. Anybody here remember Skype? Yeah, that's kind of, maybe you can look that up on Netscape when you get home. That's okay. But no, Skype was the thing, and they'd bring me in, and they were asking me, how are you doing, and tell us your story, encourage these pastors, this is an unbelievable thing that God is doing, and all that kind of stuff. It was going so well. We had plans to launch more campuses of the church, more locations. And on a personal level, life was great. It was going, I was raising 3 amazing kids. I was married and my wife had a great job. We had a great house in a beautiful area of Minnesota, not far away from a lake. Like, life was pretty good when the thing just kind of kept taking off. But 8 years into it, we hit some pretty serious problems. And I'm not going to go into what the problems were or kind of, slice and dice it that way. The truth is, it doesn't even really matter. But when the problems of the church hit, I'm telling you, they hit hard and they hit fast. And it was like the whole train just ground to a stop, got put in reverse, and started backtracking on us the wrong way. The issues I was up against in the church led to a lot of personal stress, a lot of personal anxiety, started dipping into some depression. We lost 73% of our congregation inside of 18 months. Honestly, I don't know of a church in America, I don't care what the size is, I don't know of a church that can survive that kind of a hit. All the friends who were Skyping me before, and Seth, you need to come. Oh, this is great. Let's tell your story. All gone. Nobody's calling me anymore. In fact, I couldn't even get them to call me back when I was calling them for help. I was getting ghosted at this point. Almost all of them were gone. I'd call people up for advice. I'd call people up for help. They used to give me like either cliche answers, like don't quit before the breakthrough. Fake it till you make it. Other pastors telling me, fake it till you make it. That's what Jesus did? What? What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. The well is drying up. So I was left in this place like, how did this happen? And I don't just mean to the church. I mean to me personally, to me. How does this go from everything is fine to this just disaster everywhere? I don't know how to even take this in or what to think of this. I mean, I thought I was doing all the things that you were supposed to do as a pastor, as a husband, as a dad. I was going through it and now I'm experiencing these kinds of problems. Like, what is this? What is going on? It was incredibly displacing for me. How many people, have you ever felt that? Like, I don't know where I am in my life, and I'm not even really sure how I got here, but I'm here, and I don't understand it, and I don't know what to make of it, and I don't really know what to do with it. I don't know, what am I doing wrong that I landed here, and I can't really even explain it? Maybe it was when you were a kid with parents who mistreated you. Maybe it was an ex. Maybe it was someone who betrayed you. Guys, here's what the story of Job teaches us. That the brokenness of the world is not a respecter of persons. Okay? It just isn't. It doesn't care what you've accomplished. It doesn't care what you've done. It doesn't care how far you've taken something. It doesn't care what kind of success you've known. Brokenness touches everybody. The attack comes to everybody. It's just a part of the way that the world works. And listen, I wish I could stand here today and tell you that if you grab on to your second story with Jesus and you really live that out with all your heart and you're really sincere about it in the pumpkin patch, that it's really going to be okay and no attack is ever going to come on you and nothing bad is ever going to happen. But that's just not true. That's not the way the world works. In fact, somebody here tell me if I'm crazy on this. Here's what I've learned. I've learned that for every slice of heaven somebody's standing on in their life, they've probably had to fight like hell to get there. And I've learned that they've also had to stand there every single day and defend the turf that God has taken in their life. That's what I've learned. Why? Because nobody's above the attack. Nobody's above it. It's like the old preacher said, there's really only three kinds of people in life. People going through a storm, people coming out of a storm, or people going into a storm. Right? Good intentions are not going to protect you. In fact, here's what I'll tell you. The bigger and the better your intentions, the more I can promise you that the attack is coming. Because the size of your attack is relative to the size of your calling. I started Second Story Church in part because when the attack hit me, one of the things that I found, and maybe you're in a similar boat today, is that I couldn't find many churches or pastors who would help me deal with it head on. I just couldn't. What most churches want to do is they want to talk about the other side of the attack, man. We want to talk about 3 steps to getting really successful kids and 4 steps to financial success and 3 ways that your marriage can be amazing and all of that kind of stuff. And it's all great and that's all good. But the problem is none of it helps me right now in the middle of the attack. None of it deals with it head on. I need to know that I'm still valuable when I don't feel like I am. I need to know that God sees me when I can't look at myself in the mirror. I need to know what to do with the complexity of real life problems, man. I need to know what to do with shame, what to do with inadequacy, what to do with lack. I need to know that God is still going to use me and that he understands me and that he's with me. Like we were just singing about, that God is not against me when all I'm seeing is attack after attack after attack. I don't need you to paint me some kind of a rosy picture of life after the storm, because if somebody doesn't throw me a life jacket right here, right now in the storm, I'm going to drown. We started Second Story because I wanted to start a church where people can survive some storms. And that means that in this church, we are very real about the process of discipleship and spiritual formation and learning to apply our faith to our life. It means that we talk about the hard stuff that people face and that people are going through. And we do it with an eye towards the fact that the decisions we have to make in the here and now are going to affect the life that we live in the there and then. Okay? Does that make sense to anybody? Faith in Jesus should be something that's not just helpful for someday, but it's helpful in the attack. It's not a source of pressure and stress that you're not good enough in it. Job knew it and he felt it real deeply. The attack comes to everybody. And that leads to Job crying out to God. So watch this. We're going to read another passage from Job. We're going to skip ahead now to Job chapter 3. And Job is starting to lose some stuff. He's starting to get sick. Bad things are starting to happen to Job. His life is beginning to unravel a little bit. This is what he says to God in Job chapter 3, verses 23 to 26. He says, "Why is life given to those with no future? Those God has surrounded with difficulties? I cannot eat for sighing. My groans pour out like water. What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble comes." So, the attack comes to Job, and Job starts comparing himself to other people. How many of you know that is a fast track to misery? Right there, right? Instagram is not your friend. I'm just going to tell you that right now. And they know it, too, because they know you're going to keep coming back thinking it's your friend, but then they're going to feed you some other stuff, and I'm not your friend, but you think I am. It's a whole thing, okay? So he's comparing himself to other people. He's saying that the things that he feared the most in life, the stuff that he dreaded, all of this stuff has happened to him, all of them. What I've dreaded has come true. Job is hitting rock bottom, and as he is, here's what he's learning. I mean, he's in the middle of losing everything, right? His family, his health, his farm, just everything. And he's learning that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you've accomplished, it doesn't matter what your background is. Here's the lesson, that eventually everybody's first story comes to an end. Everybody's first story comes to an end. Everybody's story. In fact, I know exactly where I was and I know exactly what I was doing when my first story came to an end. I was out for a jog. It was spring. It was 2013. One of the first, okay enough outside days to jog outside. I was listening to my assortment of, as usual, of 80s hair bands as I was jogging down the road, because I'm the type of guy that I cannot go for a jog unless I feel like the devil himself is chasing me. So that's the situation. And I was getting near the lake that we lived near. It was coming into view over a rise in the dirt road that we lived on. And I honestly was feeling as good as my 40-year-old self could feel at the time, right? And then it hit. And when it hit me, it was bizarre. It was crazy. As I approached the lake, I noticed that I was starting to feel kind of sick. I wasn't feeling good at all, feeling uneasy, feeling real unsure of myself. My legs started to get real weak, real wobbly. My throat began to tighten up. I pulled my headphones out of my ears in kind of mid-guitar solo and slowed myself to a walk. And I was like, what is going on with me? And as I'm wondering these things, my eyes began to get overwhelmed and flooded with tears. And out of nowhere, I began to cry. And when I say I began to cry, I don't just mean like I had a little, polite cry, a little sniffly kind of. I mean, I was ugly crying on the side of the road. I was sobbing. This was a deep kind of weeping. I dropped to my knees. I could barely catch my breath. I remember the lake being in front of me and feeling like the wind had just been stolen right out of my body. I had no idea what was happening to me. I started slapping the ground, just kind of desperation, like I can't breathe. I don't know what's happening in my life right now. Like I'm trying to tap out of a match with John Cena or something. Like something bad is going on here. Had no idea where it came from, and I had no idea how to make it stop. What had happened to me was that, like a lot of people do, I had tied a lot of my worth and I had tied a lot of my identity to my work. And when the church ended up crashing, Seth ended up crashing. I had a full-on anxiety attack on the side of the road, like just a complete breakdown. I remember walking back to my house, my body was still shaking, and I sat down on my front porch, and I took out my cell phone, and I called my dad, and I told him, I don't know what's happening to me, but I don't think I'm okay. I don't understand this, and I wasn't okay. In the coming months, I would see the closing of my church, the short sale of my house, a major career transition from ministry into teaching just to stay financially afloat, which meant another really big shift in identity and crisis for me. And I also saw the end of my marriage. That day on that side of that dirt road was the end of my first story. And it sucked. It was awful. But in the days between that one and this one, do you know what I've learned? I've learned that I'm not the only one that's ever experienced that. And I've learned that I'm not alone in it. Because I've learned that most people, almost everyone, experiences it at some point. At some point, I'm just telling you, you live your life long enough, and you're going to come up against some questions. You're going to come up against some problems. You're going to come up against some situations that you never saw coming and that you don't really know what to do with. Something's going to throw you. Something's going to buck you. Something's going to get into your head and get you into that Job frame of mind where everything I've ever feared is coming true. I really am up against a problem that I can't defeat on my own. And I really do have issues to face. And this stuff, guys, come on, this happens to all of us. This happens to everybody. And it might not be your fault. It might not be something you asked for. It might be something that you didn't want and you didn't cause, or maybe you did. But either way, you can't stop it from hitting you. You can't. And this is the point for a lot of people at which they just cap it off and quit. A lot of people camp out right here for the rest of their life. This is where addictions take hold. This is where people start giving in to temptations. This is where a lot of people just give up and say, look, man, I tried, right? This is as far as I'm going in my life. I am going no farther. I don't have the energy to try to rebuild all this and just watch it get destroyed all over again. I realized that when it happened to me, that I've got some decisions to make, and they're pretty big. And this is part of the reason that we started Second Story. Because here's what I've found. I've found that way too many churches, they don't name the battles that people face. Instead, we've gotten real good at blaming them for being in them. The churches I went to as I was rebuilding my life, the messages, they tended to be on one of two different things. It was either, yes, God loves you, but you're really stupid and your problems are all your fault. Okay, right? And I'm simplifying, but that's pretty much what the message was. And then let me explain to you intellectually how dumb your thinking is. Or it was just the opposite extreme, right? It was, let's dwell on our wounds and our problems and our feelings. Let's glorify them. Let's worship our feelings instead of healing them. Let's normalize them, and let's never move out of them. Let's just stay right here. I just started noticing this in the church, that when people struggle, the church tends to either club people with a theology book, or we're getting stuck in convincing ourselves that all of these problems are a good thing, so we sit in them for the rest of our lives, right? My experience and Job's experience was that neither one of these things are all that helpful. Neither one of them are. So here's a question. What if we started a church where we understand at a deep level that first stories end, and when they do, there's a second story waiting to be lived out? And that shaming people who already feel terrible about themselves doesn't do anybody any kind of good ever. It just doesn't. Blaming people does no good. So instead of normalizing all of our wounds and our hurts and our habits and our feelings and all this stuff that's driving us crazy, what if we, spend some time learning how to forgive? What if we spend some time bringing these honestly before God and learning how to surrender and actually ask Him to heal? So, what if we actually learned how to do what Paul said when he said that we need to be a people in the church, come on, who learn to grieve, but not as those who have no hope? What if we could think hope and grief into each other? Because here's the thing. I've noticed that the more I understand God's love, the more deeply I feel it. And the more deeply I feel it, the more I understand it. These two things are like a constant movement in my life of understanding who God is and living it out in my soul. Your head and your heart are not enemies, but when your first story ends, come on now, it sure feels like they are, right? So what if we could start a church that addresses deep spiritual grief and hopelessness and lack of purpose and real problems in life, and we could do it with tenderness and compassion and love that allowed people to step into their lives with grace and healing and hope? Like, what if we could do that? Like, what if we could take a whole different approach? I think it would help us change what people believe is possible when their first story ends and they found themselves on the side of the road, when they've come to the end of themselves and it's all catching up with them. I think that could help some people, don't you? And that leads me to the third piece, the third lesson from the book of Job. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit now. But I don't know how much you know about the story of Job, but Job had some pretty interesting friends in his life. Okay? Job had lost everything. And he had, in particular, a few friends, and he had a wife. Most of them were absolutely zero help to him, sir, when it comes to helping him figure out how to deal with this life that's fallen apart. His wife, at one point, no joke, actually just told him, I think you should just curse God and die. Thanks, honey. I don't know what you do with that. That's rough, man. That's tough. Job had some real winners in his circle, but not all of them were bad. Not all of them were bad. In fact, one of his friends tried to help Job, and he tried to help him see kind of what was possible in his life and what could be done in the middle of his situation. And as he did that, this is what he said in Job 36, 2-5. So this is Job's friend talking to Job about God and about hope and about don't you quit on me and about come on, you still got a pulse, and if God gave you breath, then there's still a possibility here. This is what he says. Job 36, verses 2-5. Let me go on, and I will show you the truth, for I have not finished defending God. I will present profound arguments for the righteousness of my Creator. I'm telling you nothing but the truth, for I'm a man of great knowledge, that God is mighty, but He does not despise anyone. Job is sitting there feeling like, I don't even think God sees me. And his friend is like, no, God doesn't despise you. He's with you in it. Here's the lesson, that whatever you're going through, lesson number 3, you can get through it, but not alone. Not alone. Job didn't need a lot of people to help him, but he did need a few who were willing to challenge his thinking and who refused to let go of him. in the middle of the battle. After losing what I did in my life, my house, my career, my church, marriage, the whole thing, social network, friends. I mean, I had moments where, I'm going to be very, very honest with you. I very nearly gave up on everything. Very nearly gave up on everything. I remember one night sitting in my car. It was late at night, middle of winter, very cold outside. And I was staring out the windshield, actually thinking to myself, like I could audibly hear the words in my mind. There is nobody in my life, including my own kids, who wouldn't be better off without me. I should just move to California. I have family out there. Maybe it's time for me to just quit everything and go find a quiet corner of San Francisco and just quit. Just start over, become somebody different. Just get out of people's way because there's nobody who really wants to be with me given the choice. Now listen, that was broken thinking coming from a broken place inside of me that needed some healing and that needed some correction. All right? And here's the problem. Here's the problem. When we get into the whole idea like, your truth is your truth and all that. The problem with that way of thinking is that when your thinking is jacked up, okay? I mean, if your truth is just your truth, then you're on your own with that. You're stuck. What you need is someone who's grounded in truth to come alongside you sometimes and help you see what's true and what isn't. What's real and what's just in your head. I was very, very fortunate and very, very blessed. I had parents who were unbelievable with me when I was going through it. I had a really skilled therapist who loves Jesus, and she spoke truth over my life, over every single lie that was causing me to feel what I was feeling. And I had one friend left. One friend in ministry. Nobody else calling me back. But I had one friend left in ministry, and he just refused to give up on me. Absolutely refused. In fact, as I healed up from all this stuff and I was making progress and starting to come around and feeling more like myself, he and I were having breakfast one day. And he said to me, Seth, I want you to think about something. I want you to come with me to St. Paul and help me start a new campus of my church. I said, I can't do that. He said, well, why not? I said, because I'm divorced. I'm disqualified, man. I mean, I've been DQ'd. Don't you know that? Nobody will want some single middle-aged divorced pastor helping lead their church. I'm never going to forget this. My friend sat across from me at the breakfast table, and as I'm talking, his eyes just flooded with tears. And he said to me, just real quiet, he said, who told you that? I said, this is true. Come on, you know that this is not our first rodeo, man. You and I both know this. It's just the truth. My story disqualifies me from my calling. He said, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen good. Okay? You're one of the most talented, skilled, and called pastors I've ever met, and what you've been through doesn't change any of that. The devil cannot take away your calling. All he can do is convince you to not go through with it. Your story isn't over. Your ministry isn't over. God is still God. You're still not. Your calling is still your calling, and you are who he says that you are. So here's the deal, Pastor Seth. He told me it's time for you to stop letting the broken things that have happened to you make decisions for you about what you're going to do with the rest of your freaking life. He absolutely wrecked me. He's still wrecking me. I hate him for that. But in challenging my thinking about God, in challenging my thinking about calling, in challenging my thinking about my identity, just all of it, he started me back on a journey of remembering who I really am and what I've really been called to. Now, I've come a long way from that day to this one, but I'm going to tell you right now, I have not done it alone. I have not done it alone. I still can't. I don't even try anymore. I don't know anybody who can. When it all went south, Job needed a friend who would speak some truth to him about who God is and who he is. He didn't need the girlfriend or the dude coming alongside him at the bar after work one day, just kind of affirming every stupid idea about his situation that he's ever had in his life. You ever have friends like that? People go, oh, yeah, no, if that's what he said to you, oh, I would leave that right now. Bro, walk away from that. Are you kidding me? Oh, yeah. You know what? California is lovely this time of year. You should check it out. I mean, it doesn't sound like anybody here appreciates you anyway. Maybe they know what they missed then if you finally leave. You don't need to be listening to that. You need people in your life who are going to shut that mess up. That's what you need. I need 2 or 3 people to point me to Jesus, and I need God to remind me of who he is. So let me ask a question. What if we started a church that did that? What if Second Story could be a community of people who understands that the Bible isn't kidding when it says that it is not good for man to be alone? And that when you're most hurting and you feel most alone and you feel most far gone, you need people coming alongside you, pointing you to Jesus, and who are saying, listen, let's let God remind you of who he is. You need people speaking truth over the lies that you've believed. What if we could start a church where people actually believe that what's ahead of them is greater than what's behind them? And I don't mean that in any kind of a cliche, preachery, kind of weird way. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't pie in the sky, hallelujah for when we die kind of stuff. I'm saying, what if we could help people see that as they heal, that nobody's ever too far gone. Nobody's ever too far out of reach. There's nobody God can't redeem. If the entire human race didn't need to start over, then what's the point of having Jesus come to earth in the first place? Why do you think he's here? Why is it that you think that everybody else can experience it, but somehow, some way, some form, it's not for you? Why do you think that God's grace is sufficient for everybody else, but somehow it's not for you? Why do you think that the Bible calls Jesus the second Adam, and we're awaiting the second coming, and we'll live inside the new and second covenant? It's because when you learn what it means to pick up your cross and follow Jesus, the first story might be over, but the second story is just beginning. That's what it means. So what if we did church like we actually believe that? That no matter where everybody's ever been or what they've ever done, what they've ever been through, I don't care who left you. I don't care what your history is. I don't care who you've slept with, what you smoked last night. Whatever your situation is, whatever your history is, what if we had a church where we specialized when people came in of asking people, who told you that? Who told you that? Where'd you get that from? And everybody needs a community of space in their lives where God can remind them that his grace is powerful and beauty really can come from ashes, that dry bones really do live again, and that your story isn't over. Why? Because in the Garden of Eden, God's story was the first story to come to an end. He's living in the second story. He's calling you to do the same thing. So after losing everybody and going through a personal hell, Job ends up getting restored. He gets healed. He is coming around in his faith. His friends are kind of back, kind of not. That's a longer story for a different time. But he's getting regrounded in truth, and he's healing from all the stuff that hurt him. And then, after everything Job has been through, this is how the book of Job ends. It might not be what you think. Chapter 42 of Job, and I'm just going to read verses 12 through 17. It says, "So the Lord blessed Job in the second half." Which half? Which half? The second half of his life, even more than in the beginning. For now he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 teams of oxen, and 1,000 female donkeys. He also gave Job more sons and 3 more daughters. He named his first daughter Jemimiah, the second Keziah, and the third Karen Hapuk. In the in all the land, no women were as lovely as the daughters of Job. I love that the Bible tells you that Job not only had more kids, but his daughters were hot. In all the land. It's so funny. It says that, and their father put them, meaning his daughters, into his will along with their brothers. Job lived 140 years after that, living to see 4 generations of his children and grandchildren. And then he died, an old man who lived a long, full life. Man, I want that on my gravestone. Here lies Seth. He lived a long, full life. Here's the lesson. And this is the foundational drive behind what this church is all about, my friends. God still sees you. And your second story can be your best story. Your best story. Do I wish none of what I've described from my story had ever happened to me? I mean, yeah, duh, right? Of course. Of course I wish that. But it did. And listen, I'm not naive about this. It happened to you too. It's happened to you too. I have no doubt that if you and I were to go out to coffee together and just sit down across the table from each other, and you could tell me all the ways that you've experienced a lot of the same things I have, that you've wondered if your story was over. You wondered if God was against you. You've wondered if he even cares. You've even maybe wondered if he even exists. You've wondered if it's possible that the future could be as good as the past when the future doesn't look anything like what I thought the future was going to look like when I got to this stage of my life. You've had people leave you too. I know you have. You've had friends that you've lost as well. I get it, man. We all have. We all have. But I love that the Bible points out that the second half of Job's life was even better than the first. The second half is when the country music song got played backwards. You know what I mean? He got the house back, the dog back, the kids back, the money back, the farm back. It all came back when it went away before. I love that part. And I take a lot of hope from it. But you know what my favorite parts of this last passage is? This blows me away. The details in the Bible, they blow me away. It says that Job wrote his daughters into his will. In Job's day, that wasn't a thing. You don't write women into the will. Women don't get into the will in this day and time in the ancient Middle East. The legacy of the father is passed to the sons. That's the way the economy of the world worked. But in his second story, Job recognized something really, really important, that the most important thing he could pass on from this life, it's not going to be his farm, it's not going to be his livestock, it's not going to be the money, it's not going to be anything else. The most important part of Job's legacy wouldn't be any of the stuff that came to him by faith. It would be the people that he built with it. Even the ones who by law should have been left out. When I was at my lowest and my deepest and my most depressed, like when I was the biggest wreck in the whole world, the one thing that got me through was that I need to get better, not for me, but I need to get better for my kids. They need their dad healthy. They need me whole. And the best gift I can give to the people around me, my greatest legacy, is that I live out my second story in such a way that when they encounter hard things in their life, they know that they can get through it because their dad did, because their grandpa did, because their uncle did, because their friend did. I have come to the conclusion that the greatest thing that I will leave on this earth isn't even how much faith I end up with. It'll be who, not what, who did you build with it? Who'd you pass it on to? That's why next week we're starting a new series called I Still See You. And we're going to spend this fall just talking about people in the church who go unseen in the church. We don't talk about these folks enough. We don't talk to these folks enough. We're going to talk about things like, what does God have to say to people going through church hurt? What does God have to say to people who are single in the church? We're great with families. We're great with kids. We're great with married people. We don't really talk too much to the single people, other than we know you hope to be one of us someday, right? Like, we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about people who are living out their walk with God in isolation, people who feel judged by other Christians in the church, people who have identity issues, people who are wondering, do I even have a place in God's kingdom? We're going to talk about all this stuff. What would God have to say to them about the fact that he's written them into the will? The people nobody thought God ever would. That they're included and they have a story to tell. You know, one of the things that's the most amazing is that in all the Bible, most scholars think that in terms of authorship, the book of Job is actually probably the oldest book in the Bible. Do you know what that means? It means that everything we just read and everything I've described to you about my life and all of that stuff, where someone like starts off life thinking everything is great and then something happens, there's a trauma, there's an event, there's a thing that happens, it's then sending them down a path that they kind of lose themselves and God needs to restore them and redeem them. You know what all this means? It means that this is the oldest story in the world. That God sees his children have things happen to them, and he redeems them over and over again. He's been doing it from the beginning with person after person after person in the Bible, all the way down, all through history, to you and to me. To God, what you've been through is not somehow so shocking and scandalous that you're the exception that's too far gone. You and I can have second stories. So I want to invite you to come back starting next week and dive into this with us. Let's just walk through this. Let's find some people who need to know that their story isn't over, and let's bring them with us next week. All of us need a second story, and we need a third story, and we need a fourth story. Some people need a fifth story or a sixth. That's fine. God will keep finding you right where you are and give you another story. That's the driving force behind everything that we're about. I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't come back to play church, man. I didn't. I came back because that's the mission. And we're trying to start a movement of people that understand that God gave Job and so many other people all throughout the Bible a second story, who built other people who had a second story, all the way to me. And I'm going to tell you right now, my friends, if he did it for me, he'll do it for you too. Come back next week. Let's start building yours. Jesus, we give you the ministry of this church. Tell your story through us. Help us to know that you are near, that we are not too far gone, and that you walk with us in all we do. Thank you for your grace and your goodness, and that even in the middle of the things that have gone to ashes in our lives, you're still in the business of bringing out beauty. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.